In the glittering lobby of Miami's Azure Palms Hotel, a 28-year-old black cleaner pushes her cart, invisible to the elite. But when she guides two Italian guests with flawless fluency, her voice stops a millionaire dead in his tracks. Her words, dance, Italian, then Russian, then patois, revealing a genius hidden in plain sight. Yet behind her brilliance she endures stinging slurs and whispered scorn, her uniform a target for prejudice. Will one moment of recognition rewrite her story? This tale of talent and triumph will leave you stunned. But how far will she rise? And at what cost? Stick around to find out. If you love stories that inspire, hit that subscribe button for our latest videos and drop a comment sharing where you're tuning in from. What secrets does she hold, and who's watching her shine? Keep listening. The Azure Palms Hotel stood like a glass crown on Miami's sun-soaked coastline, its 40 stories glinting against the dawn. Inside, the lobby hummed with the pulse of wealth, marble floors echoing the clack of Italian loafers, air thick with the scent of jasmine and ambition. It was 7:12 a.m., and Diane Rodriguez, 28, pushed her cleaning cart through the chaos, her braided hair tucked beneath a navy cap. Her burgundy uniform clung to her skin in the humid heat, its stiff fabric a silent command, stay unseen. To the guests, movie stars, tech moguls, heiresses in oversized sunglasses, she was a shadow, as much a fixture as the crystal chandeliers overhead. But Diane carried a secret sharper than the polish on the brass railings she wiped down. She was a linguist, a virtuoso of 8 languages, her mind a kaleidoscope of words most in this room would never grasp. Diane's cart rattled as she maneuvered past a group of executives barking into earpieces, their voices a cacophony of deadlines and deals. She kept her eyes low, not out of shame but survival. 5 years at the Azure Palms had taught her the rules. Don't linger, don't speak unless spoken to, don't draw attention, especially not as a black woman from Overtown, Miami's poorest corner, where dreams were as scarce as shade. Yet her ears caught everything: the cadence of a Spanish argument by the concierge desk, the clipped German of a guest on her phone, the lilting patois of a Jamaican couple lost near the elevators. Each sound was a thread, and Diane's mind wove them into tapestries of meaning. She paused by a potted palm, its fronds brushing her arm like a whispered secret. 2 Italian guests, a couple in their 60s draped in linen and gold, stood bewildered by the touchscreen directory. The woman's voice trembled with frustration, her husband's hands gesturing wildly. "Dov'è il ristorante sul tetto?" she pleaded, her words met with blank stares from passers-by. Diane glanced at the concierge desk, where Karen Pierce, 40, a white woman with a pinched smile, typed furiously, ignoring the growing line of guests. Karen's eyes flicked toward the Italians, then away, as if their confusion was a personal front. Diane's instinct kicked in. She propped her mop against the cart and stepped forward. "Posso aiutarvi," Diane said, her Italian as smooth as the marble beneath her feet. The couple turned, their faces softening with relief. She gestured toward the elevators, her voice warm but precise. "Il ristorante è al 39° piano. Prendete l'ascensore a sinistra, poi seguite I cartelli." The woman clasped Diane's hand, gratitude spilling from her eyes. "Grazie, grazie mille," her husband echoed, scribbling the directions on a napkin. Diane smiled, a small curve of her lips, and nodded. As they shuffled off, she felt Karen's gaze boring into her back, sharp as a splinter. She didn't need to look to know the concierge's lips were pursed, her resentment a quiet poison. Diane returned to her cart, but the lobby's rhythm had shifted. A Russian businessman, his suit straining at the seams, jabbed at a check-in kiosk, muttering curses under his breath. "Eto bezumie," he growled, his screen flashing an error. Diane hesitated. She could walk away, let the front desk handle it, avoid the trouble. But the man's frustration tugged at her, a mirror to her own silent battles. She approached, her voice low. "Pozvolt min pomosh," she said in Russian, her accent crisp as Moscow snow. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing, then widening. She tapped the screen, guiding him through the prompts. "Vot teper vi poryadke," she said, stepping back as the kiosk spat out his keycard. He muttered a gruff, spasibo, already turning away. But Diane caught the flicker of surprise in his glance. Across the lobby, Mark Williams, 34, strode through the revolving doors, his tailored suit catching the morning light. At 6'2", with a Rolex glinting on his wrist and a phone pressed to his ear, he was a force of nature, a tech millionaire who'd turned cryptocurrency into a 9-figure empire. His voice was sharp, negotiating with a Berlin partner, but his eyes scanned the room, always hunting for the next opportunity. Then he heard it, a voice warm yet commanding, slicing through the lobby's din. It wasn't the Italian he recognized, nor the Russian that followed, but the ease of it, the fluidity, like a musician shifting keys without a pause. He lowered his phone, his conversation forgotten. Mark's gaze locked on Diane, now speaking. Patois to a Jamaican guest. A middle-aged man in a bright shirt lost on his way to the spa. You take the elevator to die 5th floor, then follow the signs fee Serenity Spa, she said, her cadence as natural as a Kingston breeze. The man grinned, his shoulders relaxing. Bless up, sister, he said, tipping his hat. Diane nodded, already turning back to her cart, but Mark couldn't look away. He'd spent years in boardrooms from Madrid to Lisbon, paying translators fortunes to bridge gaps he couldn't. Yet here, in a cleaner's uniform, was a woman wielding languages, like weapons, her brilliance unnoticed by the world around her. He took a step closer, his polished shoes silent on the marble. Diane was wiping down a railing now, her movements practiced, her face unreadable. Mark's mind raced. He'd seen her before, passing her in the halls during his stays, her cart a constant in the hotel's orbit. He'd never registered her. Not really, and the realization stung. But then came the sharper sting. A guest, a white woman in a designer dress, brushed past Diane, muttering, "Why's the maid talking so fancy? Stick to cleaning." Diane's hand froze on the railing, her jaw tightening, but she didn't respond. She'd heard worse. Slurs hissed in elevators, snide remarks from staff like Karen. Each one was a bruise hidden beneath her calm. Mark's jaw clenched, not from anger at Diane, but at the casual cruelty he'd just witnessed. He glanced at Karen, still typing, her eyes darting toward Diane with a venom that matched the guests. The lobby's glamour felt hollow now, its sheen masking an uglier truth. Diane wasn't just overlooked, she was targeted, her uniform a bullseye for prejudice. Mark slipped his phone into his pocket, his decision made. He didn't know her name yet, didn't know the weight of her story, but he knew one thing. This woman was no ordinary cleaner, and he wasn't going to let her brilliance stay invisible any longer. As Diane pushed her cart toward the service corridor, her sneakers squeaking faintly, Mark took a breath. "Excuse me," he called, his voice low but firm. Diane turned, her dark eyes wary, bracing for another jab, but Mark's face held something else, curiosity, maybe even respect. The lobby's noise faded, and for a moment it was just them, two strangers on the edge of something seismic. What came next would shake the Azure Palms to its core, but that was a story yet to unfold. The Azure Palms Hotel lobby buzzed like a hive, but for Diane Rodriguez, the air felt heavier now. Mark Williams's voice, low, deliberate, cutting, through the din, had stopped her mid-step, her cleaning cart a frail shield between them. "Excuse me," he'd said, and her heart lurched. She turned, her dark eyes guarded, braced for a reprimand or worse. 5 years of slurs and sideways glances had honed her instincts, each interaction a potential trap. But Mark's face wasn't hard or mocking. His blue eyes held something unfamiliar, curiosity, maybe awe. "Can you spare a few minutes, Diane?" he asked, glancing at her name tag. Her fingers tightened on the cart's handle. "Now?" she said, her voice steady but wary. "Yes, in my suite. I'd like to talk." The words hung like a dare. Diane's gaze flicked to the service corridor where her shift waited. Glass doors to wipe, trash bins to empty. A guest's suite wasn't her place, especially not a penthouse owned by a man like Mark Williams, whose wealth radiated from his tailored suit to the Rolex glinting on his wrist. She'd seen him before, striding through the hotel like he owned the air itself, a tech millionaire who made fortunes while she scrubbed floors for rent. But his tone wasn't pitying or patronizing, and that unnerved her more. Before she could answer, Jamal Carter, her supervisor, appeared from the corridor, his tired eyes softening at her hesitation. "Go on, Diane," he said, his deep voice a quiet anchor. "I'll cover you." She nodded, swallowing the knot in her throat, and followed Mark to the private elevator. The elevator ride was a silent ascent, the mirrored walls reflecting Diane's burgundy uniform against Mark's crisp navy suit. Her sneakers squeaked faintly, a stark contrast to his polished loafers. She kept her hands clasped, her mind racing. Was this a test? A trick? She'd learned to trust little in a world that saw her as less educated, less deserving, less human. The ding of the 40th floor snapped her back. The doors slid open to Mark's penthouse suite, a sprawl of cedar-scented opulence. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Miami's turquoise coastline, the morning sun gilding leather furniture, and a glass desk that gleamed like ice. "Please, sit," Mark said, gesturing to a chair. Diane sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes scanning the room, not in awe, but in calculation. Mark leaned against the desk, his posture relaxed, but his gaze intense. "I heard you in the lobby," he began, his voice measured. "Italian, Russian, patois, like you were born to it. How many languages do you speak?" Diane's shoulders tensed. She'd answered this question before, to coworkers who laughed, it off to guests who sneered at her fancy talk, but Mark's tone demanded truth. 8, she said, her voice flat, listing them like a roll call. Spanish, Italian, Russian, French, Portuguese, German, Dutch, patois. Mark blinked, his composure faltering. 8? He repeated as if testing the weight of the word. She nodded, her expression unreadable. "Yes, sir." He rubbed his chin, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "What's your name?" "Diane Rodriguez." He paused, then asked the question that burned in his mind. "How does someone like you end up cleaning hotel rooms?" Diane's eyes flicked to the ocean beyond the windows, its waves a restless mirror to her thoughts. She could deflect, give a polite half-answer, but something in Mark's face, earnest, almost hungry for understanding, pulled the truth from her. "You want the real answer?" she asked, her voice low, a challenge. "Always," he said. Leaning forward, she exhaled, rubbing her palms together as if warming the words. "I grew up in Overtown, Miami's poorest neighborhood. Single mom, no dad. I was a nerd, taught myself Spanish from library books, Italian from late-night soaps. Got a scholarship to Florida International University, majored in linguistics. Junior year, my mom got breast cancer. I dropped out to work, pay her bills. She died 2 years later. Now I clean rooms to keep the lights on and put my brother Caleb through college. He's 18, studying engineering." Mark listened, his face still but his eyes alive with something Diane couldn't name. Guilt, maybe, or recognition. He'd clawed his way up from a Boston suburb, a kid of mechanics and waitresses, but his struggles paled against hers. "You kept learning," he said. Not a question, but a statement. Marveling. She nodded, her voice softening. "Podcasts, apps, old textbooks from thrift stores, it's what keeps me sane, like a piece of me nobody can take." She paused, then added, "Most folks don't ask. They see the uniform and—" She trailed off, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Assume," Mark finished, the word heavy between them. Diane met his gaze, unflinching. "Exactly." The room fell quiet, the hum of the city below a distant pulse. Mark's mind churned. He'd built an empire on spotting potential. Coders, basements, startups and garages. But he'd walked past Diane dozens of times, blind to the genius mopping his floors. The sting of that failure was sharp, but sharper still was the memory of the lobby, the guest's sneer. "Why's the maid talking so fancy?" and Karen Pierce's venomous glare. Diane wasn't just overlooked. She was a target, her blackness a mark in a world that rewarded conformity. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words felt hollow against her truth. Meanwhile, in the staff break room, a different story brewed. Karen Pierce leaned across a chipped table, her voice a hiss as she spoke to Lisa Monroe, the bartender. With a peroxide blonde bob and a sharper tongue. "She's out there playing translator, acting like she runs the place," Karen spat, her eyes narrow. "Who does she think she is?" Lisa smirked, stirring her coffee. "You know how they get, thinking they're better than us. Probably showing off for tips." Their laughter was brittle, laced with a bigotry that clung like damp rot. Jamal, Carter, passing by with a mop, overheard and clenched his jaw. He'd seen Diane's quiet strength, her refusal to bend under snide remarks. He made a mental note to check on her later. Back in the suite, Diane stood, smoothing her uniform. "I should get back to my shift," she said, her tone polite but firm. Mark nodded, still processing the weight of her story. "Thank you, Diane, for your time, for this." He gestured vaguely, as if words couldn't capture the shift he felt. She gave a small nod and headed for the elevator, her sneakers silent on the hardwood. As the doors closed, Mark stared at the ocean, his mind circling one thought. Talent like hers didn't just deserve a chance, it demanded one. But what he didn't yet know was how fiercely the hotel's undercurrents would fight to keep Diane in her place. Diane stepped into the service corridor, the fluorescent lights harsh after the suite's glow. Her cart waited, a reminder of the world she'd returned to. A world of bleach and whispers where her brilliance was a secret she guarded alone. But as she gripped the handle, a spark flickered in her chest. Mark's questions, his listening, had cracked something open. Not hope, not yet, just the faint possibility of being seen. For now, that was enough. The service corridor of the Azure Palms Hotel was a world apart from its gleaming lobby, its fluorescent lights buzzing like trapped wasps, walls scuffed by years of carts and hurried boots. Diane Rodriguez, 28, stood by her cleaning cart, the bleach scent clinging to her burgundy uniform. Her heart still thrummed from the penthouse conversation with Mark Williams, his questions about her 8 languages: Spanish, Italian, Russian, French, Portuguese, German, Dutch, patois, lingering like a half-heard melody. She gripped the cart's handle, grounding herself in the familiar, glass to wipe, floors to mop. But the spark he'd ignited, that faint whisper of being seen, refused to fade. She shook her head, pushing the cart forward. Dreams were dangerous in a place like this, where her blackness and her uniform made her a target for whispers and, worse. Above, in his penthouse suite, Mark Williams paced before the ocean view windows, the morning sun carving shadows across his tailored suit. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. "Dutch investors here early. Translator canceled. Meeting in 45 minutes." Mark cursed under his breath. The deal, a $20 million partnership with a Rotterdam tech firm, was critical, and he'd spent months navigating cultural nuances. Without a translator, it could unravel. His mind flashed to Diane, her voice in the lobby, weaving Italian, Russian, and patois with an ease that shamed his hired linguists. He'd seen potential before, coders, in basements, visionaries, and dive bars. But this was different. This was raw, unpolished genius. He grabbed his phone, dialing the front desk. "Find Diane Rodriguez, now." Diane was scrubbing a smudged elevator panel when Jamal Carter, her supervisor, found her. His tired eyes held a glint of urgency. "Williams wants you upstairs," he said, his voice low. "Something about a meeting." Diane's stomach twisted. "Me? Why?" Jamal shrugged, but his faint smile betrayed pride. "Go find out, I got this." She wiped her hands on her uniform, her pulse quickening. The elevator ride to the 20th floor felt like a ascent into unknown territory, her sneakers stark against the mirrored walls. She'd faced guest slurs and staff sneers, but this, being summoned by a millionaire, felt like stepping onto a tightrope. The conference room was a sleek cocoon of glass and steel, its long table flanked by leather, Chairs, the Miami skyline a dazzling backdrop. Mark stood by a projector, his Rolex catching the light as he greeted two Dutch investors. Men in their 50s, their suits crisp, their expressions guarded. Diane hesitated at the door, her uniform a glaring contrast to the room's polish. Mark's eyes met hers, his nod firm. "Diane, come in." She stepped forward, her chin high despite the weight of every eye. "Our translator canceled," Mark said, his voice steady. "I need you to step in. Can you handle Dutch?" Diane's breath caught. She'd taught herself Dutch from podcasts and library books, but a corporate meeting. "I'm not certified," she said, her voice low. Mark's gaze didn't waver. "You're better than certified. You're real. Will you do it?" The investors exchanged glances, their skepticism palpable. Diane felt it, the same judgment she'd faced from guests who sneered, "Why's the maid talking so fancy?" But she'd survived Overtown's grit, her mother's cancer, years of being invisible. She could survive this. "Okay," she said, her voice steady as stone. Mark gestured to a chair and she sat, her hands clasped to hide their tremor. The investors introduced themselves, Henk and Lars, their accents thick as Dutch fog. Diane listened, her mind parsing their words like a code. When Henk began, outlining the partnership's terms in Dutch, Diane translated, her voice clear, her English precise. "Hij zegt dat de investering gericht is op schaalbare AI-oplossingen," she said, her eyes on Mark. "They're focused on scalable AI solutions." Mark nodded, his surprise masked by a professional calm. Diane's translations flowed, seamless as a river, capturing not just words but intent, the subtle emphasis Henk placed on betrouwbaarheid, reliability, the wry humor in Lars's, aside about Amerikaanse overdriving. She leaned into it, her confidence growing. When Lars cracked a joke about Dutch frugality, Diane responded in Dutch, "Misschien maar jullie bouwen wel de beste dijken," a quip about their famous dikes. The room erupted in laughter, the investors' shoulders relaxing, their guarded smiles opening. Mark watched, his jaw tight with something like awe. He'd hired translators who stumbled over idioms, but Diane? She was a bridge, not just between languages, but between people. The meeting stretched 40 minutes, the deal inching forward, terms clarified, trust built. Henk shook Diane's hand as they wrapped, his grip firm. "Jij bent uitzonderlijk," he said in Dutch, his eyes warm. Diane translated for Mark with a faint smile. "He says I'm exceptional." Lars nodded, adding in accented English, "Where did you find her?" Mark grinned, his voice low. "Right here." Diane gathered her notes, her heart pounding with a pride she hadn't felt in years. She'd done it, not just translated, but shaped the room, made it hers. But as she stepped into the hallway, the bubble burst. Karen Pierce waited by the elevator, her concierge badge gleaming, her lips a thin line of contempt. "Don't get too comfortable," she snapped, her voice a venomous whisper. "You're still a cleaner. This isn't your place." Diane's fists clenched, the triumph in her chest souring. She'd heard this before, slurs from guests, uppity, hissed by staff like Karen, whose blue eyes burned with a resentment that wasn't just professional, it was racial, raw, a reminder of the lines Diane dared to cross. "Keep talking, Karen," Diane said, her voice low, steady. "It's not my fault you're scared of change." Karen's face flushed, but Diane turned away, her sneakers firm, on the carpet. In the service corridor, Jamal caught her eye, his brow raised. "Heard you killed it up there," he said, his voice warm. Diane nodded, but her smile was tight. "Yeah, but some folks aren't happy about it." Jamal's jaw tightened. "Karen?" Diane didn't answer, but her silence was enough. He leaned closer, his voice a quiet shield. "Watch your back, all right? You're too good for their nonsense." Diane nodded, gratitude flickering in her chest. She pushed her cart forward, the bleach scent grounding her. The meeting had been a victory, but Karen's words echoed, a warning of battles to come. Upstairs, Mark sat in the conference room. the investor's praise ringing in his ears. Diane wasn't just talented, she was a force. But what he didn't yet see was the storm her brilliance would unleash. The corridor's buzz faded as Diane resumed her shift, her mop tracing familiar arcs. The Dutch word still danced in her mind, a reminder of what she could do when given a chance. But Karen's venom clung too, a shadow of the world she navigated daily. For now, she cleaned, her hands steady, her heart a quiet furnace. The Azure Palms was a glittering cage, but today she'd cracked its bars, just a little. The service corridor of the Azure Palms Hotel was a labyrinth of fluorescent hum and concrete chill, a stark contrast to the lobby's gilded glow. Diane Rodriguez, 28, pushed her cleaning cart through its shadows, the echo of Karen Pierce's venom. "You're still a cleaner. This isn't your place," burning in her ears. Her hands gripped the mop handle, steadying the tremor of anger and pride that surged from her triumph in the conference room. She'd translated Dutch for Mark Williams' investors, turned a stalled deal into laughter and handshakes. Yet Karen's words were a cold reminder. Brilliance didn't erase the weight of her burgundy uniform or the blackness that made her a target. The cart's wheels squeaked, a rhythm to her thoughts, but a new sound broke it. A voice urgent calling her name from the corridor's end. Mark Williams stood there, his tailored suit incongruous against the scuffed walls, his blue eyes sharp with purpose. Diane froze, her pulse spiking, twice in one day. The millionaire's attention felt like a spotlight, both thrilling and perilous. "Diane," he said, his voice low. "Can we talk again? In my suite." Her instinct was to retreat, to shield herself with the familiar labor of her shift. But Jamal Carter, her supervisor, emerged from a nearby storeroom, catching Mark's words. "Go," Jamal said, his tired smile a quiet push. "I got you." Diane nodded, her throat tight, and followed Mark, her sneakers whispering on the Kai's linoleum as they headed for the private elevator. The penthouse suite was a world of cedar and sea salt, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing Miami's turquoise horizon. Diane stood by the door, her hands clasped, refusing the leather chair Mark offered. The opulence, the glass desk, the abstract art, felt like a stage she didn't belong on, not yet. Mark leaned against the desk, his Rolex glinting, his posture less commanding than curious. "You were incredible with the investors," he said, his voice warm but direct. "You didn't just translate, you built trust. I've paid thousands for less." Diane's eyes narrowed, wary. Compliments were rare and often came with strings. "Thank you," she said, her tone flat, waiting for the catch. Mark straightened, his gaze locking on hers. "I want to create a role for you, guest relations linguist. You'd handle international clients, bridge cultural gaps, full salary, benefits, no more cleaning." The words hit like a wave, dizzying, almost unreal. Diane's breath caught, her mind racing. A job like that, greeting VIPs using her 8 languages, was a dream she'd buried years ago, when her mother's cancer and Overtown's rent smothered her linguistics degree. But dreams were traps, and she'd learned to trust only what she could hold. "Why me?" she asked, her voice low, a challenge. Mark didn't flinch. "Because you're the best I've seen, and I'm done ignoring talent like yours." Diane shifted, her sneakers scuffing the hardwood. "I don't have a degree," she said, testing him. Mark's smile was faint, almost conspiratorial. "Neither did I when I started. You've got something rarer, grit and genius." Her chest tightened, pride warring with doubt. She thought of the lobby, the guests' sneer. "Why's the maid talking so fancy?" And Karen's glare, sharp as a blade. "This isn't pity, is it?" she asked, her eyes boring into his. "Because I don't need that." Mark shook his head, his voice firm. "This is business. You're an asset." The word, asset, landed, like a key, unlocking something in her. She bit her lip, then nodded. "All right, I'm in." Their handshake was brief, electric, a contract sealed in silence. The news spread like wildfire, but Mark wanted it formal. At 3 p.m., he called a staff meeting in the hotel's Sapphire Room, a cavern of blue velvet and chandeliers where managers briefed crews. Diane stood at the back, her uniform stark among the pressed shirts of concierges and bartenders. Mark took the podium, his presence commanding. "We're making a change," he said, his voice clear. Diane Rodriguez is our new guest relations linguist. Her fluency in 8 languages and her work ethic make her perfect for this role. He gestured to Diane, and the room turned, a sea of eyes, some curious, some warm, some cold as ice. Jamal. Carter clapped first, his calloused hands loud in the silence, his proud nod a beacon for Diane. Others followed. Concierges, bellhops, a young black concierge named Tasha Green, 22, whose wide eyes held a spark of awe. But not everyone joined. Karen Pierce, arms crossed, stood by the wall, her lips a thin line of contempt. Beside her, Lisa Monroe, the bartender, whispered, her peroxide blonde hair catching the light. "Diversity quota," Lisa muttered, loud enough for nearby ears. Bet she begged for it. Karen's smirk was a silent agreement. Their words a poison rooted in racial resentment, a belief Diane's rise was unearned, unnatural. Diane felt their stares, sharp as pins, but kept her chin high. She'd faced worse, slurs in elevators, uppity, hissed in break rooms. This was just louder, bolder. Tasha, standing nearby, caught Diane's eye, her shy smile a quiet ally. The applause faded, and Mark continued outlining Diane's duties. But the room's undercurrent was alive, a tension that crackled like static. As the meeting ended, staff dispersed, some offering Diane nods, others avoiding her gaze. Jamal approached, his voice low. "You did good up there today. Don't let the haters get you." Diane's smile was tight. "I'm used to it," she said, but the weight of Karen and Lisa's words lingered. In the break room later, Karen and Lisa leaned over a table, their voices a venomous hum. "She's acting like she's better than us," Karen hissed, her coffee cup trembling in her hand. "A cleaner playing princess." Lisa's laugh was sharp. "Give it a week. She'll crash and burn." Their words weren't just jealousy. They were laced with the same bigotry that fueled guest slurs, a belief Diane's blackness disqualified her from anything but servitude. Across the room, Tasha overheard, her jaw tight. She thought of Diane's calm in the lobby, her ease with languages Tasha envied. Tasha slipped out, vowing to tell Diane she wasn't alone. Diane returned to her cart, her shift unfinished, despite the seismic shift in her life. The bleach scent was a tether, grounding her in a world she knew. But as she wiped a mirror, her reflection showed something new, a flicker of possibility, fragile but fierce. Mark's offer wasn't just a job. It was a door, one she'd never dared open. Yet Karen and Lisa's whispers, the eyes in the Sapphire Room, were a reminder. Doors like this came with a fight. She straightened, her hands steady. She'd survived. Overtown, her mother's death, years of being invisible. She could survive this. The Azure Palms was shifting beneath her feet, and Diane Rodriguez was ready to claim her place. The Azure Palms Hotel shimmered under Miami's relentless sun, its glass facade a mirror for the city's ambitions. Inside, Diane Rodriguez, 28, stood at the lobby's heart. No longer a shadow pushing a cleaning cart, but a force in a tailored navy blazer, her name tag gleaming. Diane Rodriguez, guest relations linguist. 2 weeks into her new role, she moved with a quiet grace, her 8 languages, Spanish, Italian, Russian, French, Portuguese, German, Dutch, patois, unfurling like a flag. Yet the weight of her burgundy uniform lingered in her bones, a ghost of the years spent invisible. The lobby buzzed, guests in designer linens, staff darting with purpose. But Diane felt the eyes, some warm, some sharp, slicing through her. Newfound spotlight. Success was a beacon, but it also drew wolves. Diane's days had transformed. This morning she greeted a Spanish diplomat, her Castilian accent flawless as she guided him to a private lounge. By noon she calmed a Russian heiress in fur, her Moscow cadence soothing a complaint about a delayed suite. Her crowning moment came with a German CEO, whose contract for a corporate retreat contained a mistranslation, a clause that could have cost the hotel millions. Diane caught it, her German precise as she flagged the error to the legal team. "You're a godsend," the manager emailed, and guests raved, their TripAdvisor reviews glowing. Diane made us feel at home in 3 languages. Her blazer felt lighter with each win, but the lobby's undercurrent was growing darker. In the staff locker room, Diane opened her locker to change for lunch, and a folded note slipped out, landing at her feet like a dead leaf. She froze, her pulse spiking. The paper was cheap, the words scrawled in black ink, "You don't belong here." Her breath caught, the letters a blade to her pride. She'd faced slurs before, guests muttering uppity, Karen Pierce's hissed warnings, but this was different. Personal, a violation of her small sanctuary. She scanned the room, empty save for the hum of a distant vacuum. Tucking the note into her pocket, she felt its weight, a reminder that her rise wasn't just a job. It was a rebellion against a system that wanted her small. The notes kept coming. By week's end, 3 more appeared. Know your place. Go. Back to cleaning. Each one was unsigned, the handwriting jagged as if written in rage. Diane's locker, once a place for her keys and granola bars, became a battleground. She didn't tell anyone, not yet. Overtown had taught her to guard her wounds, but the words burrowed deep, joining the echo of Karen's venom and the guest's sneer. Why's the maid talking so fancy? At night in her tiny apartment, she'd unfold the notes, staring at their hate, her resolve hardening. She wasn't invisible anymore, and that scared someone enough to strike. The lobby wasn't just a stage for Diane's triumphs, it was a crucible for resentment. Lisa Monroe, the bartender with a peroxide blonde bob, leaned against the bar during a slow shift, her voice a venomous whisper to a busboy. "Diane didn't earn that job," she said, her eyes glinting. "She charmed Williams, probably more than just talking, if you know what I mean." The busboy snickered, and the rumor spread like wildfire, twisting Diane's talent into a stereotype. Her blackness, her womanhood weaponized in hushed tones. Lisa's words weren't just gossip. They were a deliberate cut, rooted in the same bigotry that fueled Karen's glares, a belief Diane's rise was a theft, not a triumph. Diane heard the rumor by midweek, carried on the lips of a housekeeping aide who averted her eyes. Her stomach churned, the lie a fresh bruise atop the note's sting. She wanted to confront Lisa, to demand why, but years of navigating prejudice had taught her restraint. Instead, she sought refuge in the HR office, where Sofia Alvarez, 32, Latina manager with a warm smile and steel in her spine, listened. Sofia's office was a haven, photos of her kids on the desk, a Puerto Rican flag pinned to the wall. "I heard what they're saying," Diane said, her voice low, handing all. "Sofia, the notes, and these keep showing up." Sofia's eyes darkened as she read, her jaw tight. "This is disgusting," she said, her accent thick with anger. "I've been there, Diane, called spicy by bosses, passed over for promotions because I'm not white enough. You're not alone." She leaned forward, her gaze fierce. "You're scaring them because you're better than they'll ever be. Keep those notes. We'll find who's doing this." Diane nodded, gratitude warming her chest. Sofia wasn't just an ally. She was a mirror reflecting the battles Diane fought daily. They talked for an hour, Sofia sharing her own climb from receptionist to HR, her stories a lifeline. "You've got this," Sofia said, squeezing Diane's hand, "but don't carry this alone." Their bond grew over coffee breaks, Sofia teaching Diane the unspoken rules of corporate life, how to navigate meetings, dodge petty traps. Diane felt stronger, her blazer fitting like armor now, but the rumor and notes gnawed at her, a constant shadow. One afternoon, her brother Caleb, 18, visited the hotel, his college backpack slung over one shoulder. He found her in the lobby, his grin wide as he hugged her. "You're killing it, sis," he said, his engineering textbooks peeking from his bag. "Mom would be proud." Diane's smile faltered. "It's not all great. she admitted, her voice low. Some folks, they don't want me here. Caleb's eyes narrowed, protective. Let him try. You're unstoppable. His words were a tether, pulling her back to why she fought. For him, for Overtown, for herself. Diane's triumphs continued, each guest interaction a small victory. She greeted a Portuguese family, her Lisbon accent easing their jet lag, and diffused a French couple's argument with a witty remark that left them laughing. Guests left tips not for her service but her presence, their gratitude a balm against the note's poison. Yet the rumor spread, a virus in the staff's whispers. In the break room, Karen Pierce caught Lisa's eye, their shared smirk a silent pact. She'll fall soon, Karen muttered, her coffee cup trembling with suppressed rage. They always do. Their words weren't just envy. They were a prayer for Diane's failure, steeped in the belief her blackness disqualified her from the role. Tasha Green, the young concierge, overheard, her jaw tight. She'd watched Diane in the lobby, her ease with languages a spark for Tasha's own dreams. Tasha slipped into the lobby, finding Diane by a potted palm. They're talking trash, Tasha said, her voice low. Lisa, Karen, all of them. I think you're amazing. Diane's eyes softened, seeing herself in Tasha's nervous awe. Thank you, she said, her voice warm. Stick around. You'll see what we can do. Tasha nodded, her resolve firming, a quiet ally in the storm. That night, Diane sat in her apartment, the notes spread on her kitchen table like a grim mosaic. She didn't cry. Overtown had burned tears out of her long ago, but her hands shook as she tucked them into a drawer. Sophia's words echoed. You're not alone. Caleb's too. You're unstoppable. She thought of the German CEO's gratitude, the Portuguese family's smiles. The hate was loud, but her victories were louder. She stood, her reflection in the window a warrior's silhouette. The Azure Palms was a battlefield, and Diane was learning its rules. The notes, the rumors, they were weapons, but she was forging her own. The Azure Palms Hotel pulsed with Miami's midday heat, its lobby a glittering stage where wealth and ambition collided. Diane Rodriguez, 28, stood at its center, her navy blazer crisp, her name tag, guest relations linguist, a badge of her improbable rise. Her 8 languages wove connections with guests, from Portuguese families to German CEOs, each interaction a quiet triumph. But beneath the lobby's sheen, a poison festered. Anonymous notes in her locker, you don't belong here, know your place, cut deeper than guest slurs, and Lisa Monroe's rumor, a vicious lie that Diane had charmed Mark Williams for. Her job spread like rot. Diane's victories were undeniable, but so was the hate, its racial edge sharp as a blade. She moved through the lobby, her smile practiced, her heart a guarded fortress. In the hotel's sapphire bar, the air was cooler, scented with citrus and bourbon. Lisa Monroe, 29, leaned against the polished counter, her peroxide blonde bob catching the light as she whispered to a server. Diane's playing the game, you know, she said, her voice a venomous hiss. Batting her eyes at Williams, using her charm. That's how they get ahead. The server smirked, the rumor gaining wings. Mark Williams, passing by on his way to a meeting, caught the tail end, his steps slowing. His blue eyes narrowed, the words igniting a fury he hadn't felt since his days scrapping in Boston's rough suburbs. Lisa's lie wasn't just gossip. It was a racial dagger, twisting Diane's talent into a stereotype. Mark stepped into the bar, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the casual hum of happy hour. Lisa, he said, his voice low, ice cold. She turned, her smirk faltering under his gaze. What did you just say about Diane? The server slipped away, leaving Lisa exposed. She shrugged, defiant, her lips curling. Just saying she's not qualified. It's not fair. Mark's jaw tightened, his Rolex glinting as he leaned closer. You're spreading lies that hurt her and this hotel. Diane's earned her role. More. Then you've earned your place behind that bar. Clean up your act or you're out. Lisa paled, her bravado crumbling, but her eyes held a flicker of resentment, unrepentant. Mark turned away, his anger simmering. This wasn't just one person. It was a culture, and he'd been blind to it too long. Diane, meanwhile, stood in Sofia Alvarez's HR office, a sanctuary of warmth amid the hotel's cold edges. Sofia, 32, sat behind her desk, a Puerto Rican. Flag pinned to the wall, her dark eyes blazing as she read the latest note Diane had found. Go back to cleaning. This is vile, Sofia said, her accent thick with disgust. We're taking this to Williams, now. Diane hesitated, her fingers tracing the note's jagged script. Overtown had taught her to endure in silence, to bury pain like a seed. But Sofia's fierce gaze, her own scars from being called spicy or passed over, was a mirror. Okay, Diane said, her voice steady but heavy. They gathered the notes, 4 in total, a grim collection, and headed for Mark's suite. Sashi, penthouse was a world of cedar and glass. Miami's skyline a dazzling backdrop. Mark stood by the windows, his face still taut from confronting Lisa. When Diane and Sofia entered, the notes in Sofia's hand, his expression darkened. Diane spoke first, her voice calm but unyielding. These started after my promotion. They're in my locker, unsigned. Mark took the notes, his fingers tightening as he read. You don't belong here. Know your place. The words were a punch, their racial venom unmistakable. This is unacceptable, he said, his voice low, a storm brewing. We're finding who did this. Diane met his gaze, her eyes searching. You mean that? Mark nodded, his jaw set. As real as it gets. Mark acted swiftly, ordering cameras installed in the locker room corridors. Discreet, legal, a net to catch the culprit. Sofia coordinated with security, her efficiency a shield for Diane's resolve. 3 days later, the trap sprang. A grainy feed showed Greg Turner, 45, a white maintenance worker with a perpetual scowl, slipping a note into Diane's locker. Confronted in a stark meeting room, Greg slumped, his defiance crumbling under Mark's stare. I resented her, he muttered, his voice thick. She got that fancy job out of nowhere, it ain't right. Sofia's eyes flashed. What's not right is your hate, she said, her voice cutting. Greg was fired, his badge confiscated. His exit a quiet ripple in the hotel's hum. But Diane, watching the footage later, felt no relief, only a hollow ache. Hate didn't vanish with one man. Mark called a staff meeting that afternoon in the Sapphire Room, its chandeliers casting a solemn glow. Diane stood near the front, her blazer crisp, her face unreadable. Jamal Carter, her supervisor, gave her a nod, his pride a silent anchor. Tasha Green, the young concierge, stood nearby, her eyes wide with admiration. But Karen Pierce lingered. By the wall, her arms crossed, her lips a thin line of defiance. Mark took the podium, his voice clear, unyielding. Racism has no place here, he said, his gaze sweeping the room. Diane's promotion isn't a fluke. It's what happens when we value talent over prejudice. Someone targeted her with hateful notes. That person is gone. But if anyone else shares those views, you're on notice. Change or leave. The room was silent, the weight of his words settling like dust. Jamal clapped, his hands loud, and Tasha joined, her applause. Tentative but growing. Others followed. A ripple of support, but Karen's hands stayed still, her eyes cold. Diane felt the rooms divide, allies like Jamal and Tasha, enemies like Karen, and a vast middle watching, waiting. Mark's speech was a line in the sand, but lines could be crossed. As the meeting ended, Tasha approached Diane, her voice low. I heard what they did. I'm sorry. Diane's smile was small but warm. Thanks, Tasha. Keep your head up. Tasha nodded, her resolve firming. A spark of the future Diane was beginning to ignite. Later, Diane sat in Sofia's office, the notes now in a security file, their poison contained but not erased. You did the right thing, Sofia said, her hand on Diane's. This place is better because of you. Diane nodded, but her eyes were distant. She thought of Overtown, of her mother's hospital bed, of Caleb's college dreams. The notes were gone. Greg was gone. But the hate they carried lingered, a shadow she'd always navigate. Mark's stand had shifted something, though. A crack in the hotel's armor, a glimpse of what could be. She stood, her blazer fitting like a second skin now. "Let's keep going," she said, her voice firm. In the lobby, Diane resumed her work, greeting a French guest with a smile, her accent Parisian perfect. The note's sting faded, replaced by the rhythm of her languages, her power. But Karen's cold stare from the concierge desk was a reminder. The fight wasn't over. Mark, watching from the mezzanine, saw Diane's grace, her strength. He'd confronted one poison, but the roots ran deep. The Azure Palms was changing, but change was a war, and Diane was its warrior. The Azure Palms Hotel gleamed under Miami's golden dusk, its glass towers reflecting a city that never slept. Diane Rodriguez, 28, moved through the lobby with a quiet authority, her navy blazer a far cry from the burgundy uniform of her past. As guest relations linguist, her 8 languages, Spanish, Italian, Russian, French, Portuguese, German, Dutch, patois, wove bridges between guests and the hotel's opulent heart. The racist notes that once haunted her locker were gone. Their author, Greg Turner, fired, but the scars lingered, a reminder of the hate that shadowed her rise. Mark Williams's stand against racism had cracked the hotel's facade, but Diane, due change was a slow burn, not a spark. Yet tonight, as she greeted a Portuguese dignitary with a flawless Lisbon accent, she felt the ground shifting beneath her, a legacy taking root. The next morning, Diane arrived to find the lobby abuzz, not with guests but with staff, their whispers circling a new sign outside the main banquet hall. The brass plaque, once blank, now read, "The Rodriguez Room." Her breath caught, her name etched in elegant script, a tribute as bold as it was quiet. Mark Williams stood nearby, his tailored suit catching the light, his blue eyes warm with a rare smile. "It's official," he said, gesturing to the plaque. "This hall hosts our biggest events, galas, summits. It's yours now, Diane." Her chest tightened, pride warring with disbelief. Overtown's grit, her mother's hospital bills, years of mopping floors. None had prepared her for this. "Why?" she asked, her voice low, searching. Mark's gaze was steady. "Because you've changed this place and we're just starting." Guests noticed, their curiosity rippling through check-ins and cocktail hours. A Brazilian heiress asked, "Who's Rodriguez?" And a bellhop shared Diane's story. Cleaner turned linguist, a black woman who spoke 8 languages. The tale spread, guests leaving reviews that praised not just the hotel's luxury, but its heart. Diane felt the weight of their eyes, no longer cutting but admiring, yet it unnerved her. Fame was a double-edged sword, and she'd learned to guard her light. In the staff break room, Jamal Carter, her supervisor, clapped her shoulder. "You're a legend now," he said, his grin wide. Diane's smile was tight. "Legends get targets, Jamal." He nodded, his eyes sober. He'd seen the notes, heard Lisa's rumors, he knew the cost. Diane's influence grew beyond the lobby. She and Sofia Alvarez, the Latina HR manager, had spent late nights drafting a program to uplift overlooked talent, cleaners, bellhops, kitchen staff, whose potential lay buried under uniforms and assumptions. They called it Rise Up, a pipeline for non-desk workers to train for higher roles. In a small meeting room, Sofia pinned a schedule to the wall, her Puerto Rican flag a quiet backdrop. "We launch next week," she said, her voice fierce. "You're the face, Diane. Your story will pull them in." Diane nodded, her blazer fitting like armor now. She thought of Tasha Green, the young concierge whose awe mirrored her own buried dreams. "Let's do this," she said, her voice a vow. Tasha was Diane's first mentee, a 22-year-old black woman with a quick smile and a hunger for more. In a quiet corner of the lobby, Diane coached her, sharing tips on greeting VIPs, navigating corporate egos. "You've got the spark," Diane said, her eyes warm. Don't let anyone dim it. Tasha's hands trembled as she scribbled notes, her dream of management training no longer a fantasy. You showed me it's possible, she said, her voice thick. I was scared to even try. Diane's heart ached, seeing herself in Tasha's wide eyes, Overtown's weight, the fear of being too much. She squeezed Tasha's shoulder. You're enough. Keep going. That night, Tasha applied for the hotel's management program, her application a spark Diane had lit. Diane's days were a whirlwind of guest interactions, each a small victory. A French diplomat, Monsieur Leclerc, visited for a trade summit, his Parisian accent thick as he praised her fluency. Over coffee in the Rodriguez room, he leaned forward, his eyes sharp. You're wasted here, mademoiselle, he said, sliding a card across the table. The UN needs translators like you. Call this number. Diane's pulse raced, the card a key to a world she'd once dreamed of. Global stages, not hotel lobbies. But the Azure Palms was her battleground, its staff, her people. She smiled, tucking the card away. Thank you, but I'm needed here. Leclerc nodded, respect in his gaze. For now, he said, a challenge unspoken. The diplomat's offer lingered, a whisper of what could be. Diane shared it with Caleb, her 18-year-old brother, over dinner in her cramped apartment. His engineering textbooks littered the table, his pride for her bright as Miami's neon. You could be global, sis, he said, his fork pausing. Why stay? Diane's eyes drifted to the drawer where she'd kept the racist notes, now in security's hands. Because I'm changing things here, she said, her voice firm. For Tasha, for others like us. Caleb grinned, protective, fierce. Mom would say you're stubborn as hell. Diane laughed, the sound rare, healing. She'd be right. His words grounded her, tying her to Overtown's roots, to the fight she'd chosen. The Rise Up launch was a quiet affair, held in a training room with folding chairs and a whiteboard. Diane stood at the front, her blazer crisp, her voice steady as she shared her story. Cleaner to linguist, invisible to indispensable. I was you, she said to the dozen staff, cooks, maids, porters, her eyes locking on theirs. Don't let anyone tell you your place. The room was silent, then erupted in applause, hands calloused from labor clapping for a future they could see. Tasha, in the front row, beamed, her application submitted, her dreams alive. Sophia squeezed Diane's arm, her eyes shining. This is it, she whispered. This is legacy. But legacy came with shadows. In the break room, Karen Pierce and Lisa Monroe whispered, their resentment undimmed by Greg's firing. The Rodriguez room? Lisa scoffed, her coffee cup trembling. It's a publicity stunt. She's still just a cleaner. Karen's smirk was cold. Let her have her moment, she'll fall. Their words, steeped in racial disdain, reached Tasha, who clenched her fists, her loyalty to Diane fierce. She slipped out, vowing to warn her mentor. The hotel was changing, but not fast enough, and Diane's light drew both allies and enemies. That night, Diane stood in the Rodriguez room, its chandeliers dim, the plaque outside a quiet testament. She traced her name, her fingers trembling, not with fear but with purpose. The diplomat's card burned in her pocket, a temptation she'd resisted. Caleb's words, Tasha's dreams, Sophia's faith. They anchored her here, in a fight bigger than herself. Mark's gesture, naming the hall, wasn't just honor. It was a challenge to keep pushing. She thought of her mother, her voice a ghost. Keep going, baby. The hotel's pulse thrummed, a battlefield and a home. Diane straightened, her reflection in the glass doors a warrior's silhouette. The Azure Palms was hers to shape, and she was only beginning. The Azure Palms Hotel stood as a beacon of Miami's ambition, its glass walls catching the dawn's first fire. Diane Rodriguez, 28, navigated its lobby with a quiet power, her navy blazer a testament to her rise from cleaner to guest relations linguist. Her 8 languages wove connections, her name on the Rodriguez room a tribute to her impact. But the air held a chill, a reminder of the racist notes and rumors that had tested her resolve. The Rise Up program, launched with Sofia Alvarez, was gaining traction, and Tasha Green's management application was a spark of hope. Yet Diane knew victory was fragile, a flame easily snuffed by those who saw her blackness as a threat. Today, that threat would show its face in a boardroom high above the city. The executive suite on the 38th floor was a world of polished oak and power, its long table flanked by men in suits, their voices a low hum of numbers and strategy. Richard Hayes, 60, a board member with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes, sat at the head, his gaze sharp. Mark Williams, 34, stood by a window, his tailored suit taut with restrained energy. The agenda was routine, revenue, expansions, until Richard leaned forward, his tone deceptively mild. "Mark, this Rodriguez woman, her promotion's causing tension. Was it necessary?" The room stilled, the question a velvet glove over a fist. Mark's jaw tightened, his blue eyes flashing. "Diane saved us millions in deals and boosted our reputation. What's your real issue, Richard?" Diane, sent to deliver a guest report to the suite, paused outside the door, her hand on the knob. Richard's voice carried, each word, a stone. "She's a cleaner, Mark. Now she's handling VIPs, it's unsettling staff." The lie stung. Diane's work was flawless, her guest reviews glowing. Mark's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. "She's a linguist who speaks 8 languages, Richard. She's earned her place. If staff are unsettled, it's their prejudice, not her performance." Diane's breath caught, her heart pounding. She'd faced slurs, notes, Lisa's rumors. But this was different. A board member, cloaked in authority, questioning her right to exist in this space. Her fingers tightened, pride and pain warring within. Richard backtracked, his smile thin. "I'm just saying optics matter. We don't need unrest." Mark leaned forward, his voice low, unyielding. "Optics?" Diane's corrected contracts. "Charmed diplomats and put us on the map. If you can't see her value, that's your blind spot." The room was silent, the other board members shifting, their discomfort palpable. Diane, still outside, felt the sting of Richard's words, but also Mark's defense, a shield she hadn't expected. She slipped away, the report undelivered. Her steps steady, but her chest tight. The boardroom's shadow followed her, a reminder that even her triumphs were battlegrounds. Back in the lobby, Diane buried the hurt, greeting a Spanish family with a smile, her accent flawless. But Richard's voice echoed, joining the ghost of "You don't belong here" from her locker notes. She thought of Overtown, her mother's weary hands, Caleb's college dreams, anchors that kept her fighting. Sofia Alvarez found her by a potted palm, her dark eyes sharp. "You okay?" she asked, sensing the shift. Diane hesitated, then shared what she'd overheard. Sophia's jaw tightened. "Hayes is old money, old biases. You're shaking his world and he hates it." Diane nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then I'll shake it harder." That afternoon, Diane led a Rise Up workshop in a training room, its whiteboard scrawled with goals, skills, confidence, opportunity. 20 staff, cleaners, cooks, porters, sat in folding chairs, their faces a mix of hope and skepticism. Diane stood tall, her blazer crisp, her voice steady. "I was you," she said, her eyes locking on theirs. "A cleaner, invisible until someone saw me. You're not just your uniform. You're talent waiting to be seen." She shared her story, Overtown's grit, her mother's death, her self-taught languages. The room leaned in, their silence a hunger. Tasha Green in the front scribbled, notes, her management dreams alive. When Diane finished, the applause was thunder, hands worn from labor clapping for a future they could claim. Tasha approached after, her eyes shining. "You make me believe I can do this," she said, her voice thick. Diane squeezed her shoulder. "You will, Tasha, I see you." The words were a mirror, reflecting the spark Mark had lit in Diane, but as the staff dispersed, a new note appeared. On Diane's desk, unsigned, in Tasha's careful script, "You're unstoppable." Diane's throat tightened. The words a balm against Richard's disdain. She tucked it away, a talisman for the fights ahead. Meanwhile, Karen Pierce, the concierge, whose venom had dogged Diane, made a choice. In the HR office, she faced Sophia, her lips a thin line. "I'm transferring," Karen said, her voice cold. "To the Coral Sands. This place isn't what it used to be." Sophia's eyes were steel. "Good. We're building something better." Karen's exit was quiet. Her badge surrendered. But her departure was a victory, a crack in the hotel's old guard. Diane, hearing later, felt no joy, only a weary relief. Karen's hate was gone, but others lingered, their whispers softer but no less sharp. That evening, Diane stood in the Rodriguez room, its chandeliers dim, the plaque outside a quiet testament. Richard's words stung, but Mark's defense, Tasha's note, and the workshop's applause were louder. She thought of her mother, her voice a ghost. "Keep going, baby." The hotel was a battlefield, but it was also a canvas, and Diane was painting it with every guest she charmed, every staffer she lifted. Sophia joined her smile warm. "You shook them today," she said. Diane nodded, her eyes on the skyline. "And I'm not done." The Azure Palms hummed, its pulse quickening with Diane's presence. Richard's pushback was a shadow, but her light was stronger, her legacy growing in Tasha's dreams, in Rise Up's promise. The fight wasn't over. Whispers lingered. Eyes watched. But Diane was ready. Her reflection in the hall's glass was a warrior's, her blazer a second skin. The hotel was changing, and she was its heart. The Azure Palms Hotel stood as a titan against Miami's twilight, its glass spires ablaze with the city's neon pulse. Diane Rodriguez, 28, stepped onto the rooftop terrace, the humid air wrapping her like a familiar embrace. Her navy blazer, now a second skin, bore her name tag, guest relations linguist, a quiet testament to her rise from cleaner to cornerstone. The skyline stretched before her, a tapestry of possibility and pain. The racist notes, Lisa's rumors, Richard Hayes's boardroom disdain, they were scars etched deep, but so were her triumphs. The Rodriguez room, the Rise Up program, Tasha's dreams. Diane's 8 languages had built bridges, but her resilience had built a legacy. Tonight, alone under the stars, she stood at a crossroads, her heart heavy with battles won, and those yet to come. The rooftop was a sanctuary, its potted palms, swaying in the breeze, the distant hum of South Beach a soft lullaby. Diane leaned against the railing, her fingers tracing the edge of a phone app open to Arabic lessons. Her 9th language, a new frontier. She'd declined a UN translator's job tethered to the Azure Palms by loyalty and purpose, but the choice lingered, a whisper of what might be. Her thoughts drifted to Overtown, her mother's weary smile, Caleb's college textbooks. She'd fought for them, for herself. But the cost, whispers, notes, eyes that judged her blackness, was a weight she carried alone. The stars above seemed to listen, their silence a canvas for her resolve. Footsteps broke the quiet, deliberate but unintrusive. Mark Williams emerged from the shadows, his tailored suit loosened at the collar, his blue eyes softened by the dusk. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice low. Diane nodded, her guard easing. Mark leaned beside her, the city's glow, reflecting in his gaze. "You've changed this place, Diane," he said, his tone earnest. "The Rodriguez room, rise up. It's more than I imagined." Diane's lips curved, a rare smile. "It's not just me. Sophia, Tasha, Jamal. They're in it too." Mark nodded, his expression thoughtful. "But you're the spark. I was blind to what was right in front of me. You made me see." Diane's throat tightened, Mark's words a balm against the scars of being unseen. "It's exhausting," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Proving I belong. Every day." Mark's jaw tightened, guilt flickering in his eyes. He'd faced skepticism as a Boston kid in tech, but never the venom Diane endured. "You shouldn't have to," he said, his voice firm. "But you're winning." Tasha's management application was approved today. Diane's eyes widened, joy breaking through her fatigue. She did it? Mark grinned. Starts training next week. Says you're the reason. Diane's chest swelled, Tasha's victory a mirror to her own. She thought of the workshop, Tasha's scribbled note, "You're unstoppable," and felt the weight of her impact. The conversation shifted, Mark sharing plans to expand Rise Up across the hotel's sister properties, a network to uplift, overlook talent. "Sophia's drafting the proposal," he said, "but it needs your voice." Diane nodded, her mind already turning. She saw cleaners like her former self, porters with hidden gifts, cooks whose dreams were buried under aprons. "There's more of us out there," she said, her voice steady. "They just need a chance." Mark's smile was quiet, proud. "You're giving it to them, and not just here, for kids in Overtown too." Diane's eyes stung, the mention of her roots a reminder of why she stayed. "We're just getting started," she said, her voice a vow. A montage of moments unfolded in her mind. Sophia pinning schedules for Rise Up, her Puerto Rican flag a beacon, Jamal mentoring a young porter, his pride echoing Diane's. Tasha in a training room, her notebook open, her dreams taking flight. The program was growing, staff applying for roles they'd never dared, bellhops to concierges, maids to event planners. Diane's story, once a whisper, was now a roar, carried in guest reviews in the Rodriguez room's plaque, in Tasha's bold step. But the whispers of hate lingered. Karen's transfer hadn't silenced them, only muted their volume. Diane knew the fight wasn't over, but her allies, Sophia's fire, Tasha's spark, Mark's resolve, were her armor. Caleb's voice echoed, a memory from their last call. "You're proof we can make it." She'd called him after the workshop, his pride a lifeline. "Keep shining, sis," he'd said, his engineering exams looming but his faith in her unyielding. Diane pulled out her phone, the Arabic app still open. Its letters a challenge she'd meet. She wasn't done learning, or fighting. The rooftop's breeze carried the scent of salt and possibility, Miami's skyline a canvas for her next chapter. She thought of the kids in Overtown, watching her from afar, needing her to prove the world could bend. Mark stepped back, his gaze on the horizon. "You've got a home here, Diane," he said, his voice soft. "But wherever you go, you'll carry this." He gestured to the city, to her heart. Diane nodded, her reflection in the glass railing a warrior's silhouette. The Azure Palms was her battleground, its scars and triumphs hers to claim. She turned to Mark, her smile fierce. "I'm not going anywhere. Not yet." He nodded, respect in his eyes, and left her to the stars. The terrace fell quiet, the city's pulse a steady drum. Diane stood alone, her phone glowing with Arabic verbs, her heart alight with purpose. Tasha's approval, Rise Up's growth, Caleb's pride. They were threads in a tapestry she was weaving, one that stretched beyond the hotel's walls. The hate, notes, rumors, Richard's disdain was a shadow, but her light was stronger, her legacy a beacon. A final thought stirred, a question for the world below. Who's the next Diane, waiting to be seen? She closed her app, her eyes on the skyline, ready for what came next. The Azure Palms shimmered, its pulse quickening with Diane's presence. Her story wasn't just hers, it was Tasha's, Sophia's, every overlooked soul daring to rise. The stars above held no answers, only promises, and Diane Rodriguez was ready to claim them all. As Diane's story fades into Miami's vibrant skyline, we're left with a powerful truth. Brilliance can shine in the most unexpected places, if only we dare to see it. What did Diane's journey spark in you? Share your thoughts in the comments. How did her resilience, her fight, her legacy inspire you? We'd love to hear your reflections. A huge thank you for joining us on this incredible tale of triumph and transformation. Your support keeps these stories alive, so hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Until next time, keep looking for the hidden stars around you. We'll see you soon.